The sprawling nexus of Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport pulsed with the relentless rhythm of global transit, a colossal, impersonal machine of steel, glass, and hurried humanity. For Staff Sergeant Elias Thorne, Retmatter, the sterile air, thick with the scent of jet fuel and lukewarm coffee, felt a stark contrast to the crisp, clean air of the base, and an even sharper one to the dusty, acrid tang of distant battlefields. Now in his late 30s, Elias moved through the terminal with the quiet strength and contained discipline of a man forged in a different kind of fire. Though dressed in civilian clothes, a meticulously pressed dark suit, the only splash of color a subdued tie, his posture still held the rigid, upright bearing of a soldier. His movements were economical, purposeful. His gaze, though observant, carried a deep, quiet reverence that set him apart from the throngs of vacationers and business travelers. He wasn't here for leisure or commerce. Elias was here on a mission, a sacred trust. He was escorting the remains of a fallen soldier, Private First Class Gabriel "Gabe" Miller, back to his hometown in rural Georgia for burial. This wasn't just a duty for Elias, it was intensely personal. Gabe had been a fresh-faced, earnest kid from his former unit, barely out of high school when he'd deployed. Elias had mentored him, shared MREs with him in dusty outposts, and seen the unvarnished courage in his young eyes. Gabe's enthusiasm, his raw idealism, had been a stark, poignant counterpoint to the hardened cynicism that combat often bred. Losing him had been a blow, a hollow ache in Elias's chest that echoed the countless sacrifices he'd witnessed. This final journey, ensuring Gabe's dignified return home, was Elias's last act of brotherhood, a solemn promise whispered in the quiet of a field hospital. In his inner jacket pocket, nestled close to his heart, he carried a small, worn, leather-bound Bible, its pages thumbed smooth with countless readings. It was a silent testament to the unwavering moral compass that had guided him through war and now sustained him in peace. The protocol for military escorts was meticulously precise, steeped in centuries of tradition and honor, designed to cushion the brutal reality of loss with layers of dignity. At the designated cargo handling area, away from the general public's hurried glances, the transfer of the flag-draped coffin from the specialized military transport vehicle to the commercial airline's cargo hold was a somber, almost reverent ballet. Elias exchanged grave, respectful nods with the airline ground staff assigned to the task. They were a small, dedicated team, their faces etched with a solemn understanding that transcended their usual duties of loading luggage. A quiet briefing confirmed the coffin's placement, the special seating arrangements for Elias near the cargo hold access point, and the general understanding of military courtesy by most airport personnel. This established the expectation of respect, an unspoken assurance that this final journey would be handled with the solemnity it deserved. As the large wheeled gurney bearing the flag-draped casket was carefully maneuvered towards the gaping maw of the cargo plane, a moment of unsettling awkwardness arose. A young, inexperienced ground crew worker, perhaps distracted by an urgent radio call, or simply unaware of the profound significance of the coffin draped in the stars and stripes, fumbled slightly with the gurney's locking mechanism. The gurney lurched, and for a heart-stopping second, the coffin shifted precariously. A quiet gasp escaped a nearby airline supervisor. Elias, without a hint of anger or aggression, simply stepped forward. His movement was deliberate, precise, honed by years of quick, decisive action under pressure. His hands, steady and strong, reached out and quietly adjusted the gurney's alignment, securing the coffin firmly back in place. He then caught the young worker's eye, offering a silent, understanding look that conveyed the gravity of the moment more effectively than any shouted reprimand. The young man, mortified, nodded curtly, his face flushing. Then, in a gesture that transcended protocol and spoke of profound personal connection, Elias gently placed his hand on the flag-draped coffin for a moment, his palm resting on the crisp fabric, a silent, heartfelt farewell to Gabe. This quiet, dignified action instantly established Elias's deep reverence for the fallen, his quiet authority, and his unwavering commitment to honor, making him instantly sympathetic and inspiring to anyone who witnessed it. It was his save the cat moment, a testament to his character before any conflict had even begun. Yet, even in this solemn environment, subtle hints of potential future conflict, insidious tendrils of corporate indifference began to surface. As Elias completed the final paperwork for PFC Miller's transit, he noticed the overly detailed, somewhat bureaucratic form. It felt like a mountain of red tape for something so sacred, demanding granular details about cargo dimensions and handling liability that seemed callous in this context. A hurried glance from a particular airline supervisor, a woman with a tightly pulled back bun and a perpetually stressed expression, dismissed Elias with a wave rather than a respectful nod as she rushed past. Later, at the gate, when Elias confirmed his special seating arrangements for the fallen soldier, the gate agent, a harried young man juggling multiple phone calls, responded with a slightly dismissive tone, a clipped, "Yes, yes, we have you noted," that hinted at a lack of true understanding or empathy for the mission's gravity. The overall impersonal, rushed nature of the commercial airport environment, designed for efficiency and profit rather than reverence and solemnity, intrinsically clashed with the sacred nature of Elias's duty. These were minor frictions, easily overlooked in the vast machinery of modern air travel, but they were the seeds of future conflict, small cracks in the veneer of respect that Elias had for so long taken for granted. They foreshadowed an impending clash between unwavering honor and unfeeling corporate bureaucracy, a battle Elias was unknowingly about to be drawn into. The quiet before the storm was beautiful, but the storm was gathering on the horizon. Elias Thorne settled into his assigned bulkhead seat on the packed Boeing 737, the faint hum of the aircraft's systems a familiar drone around him. His seat was strategically located near the forward cargo hold access point, a silent sentinel for the sacred cargo beneath his feet. The contrast between his solemn focus and the excited chatter of other passengers was jarring. Children giggled, their parents shushed them gently. A group of friends in the row ahead clinked plastic cups, already celebrating their vacation. The mundane symphony of commercial air travel, a familiar backdrop to countless journeys, felt profoundly out of sync with the gravitas of his mission. The plane was now fully boarded, every seat taken, the overhead bins crammed shut. The main cabin door was secured, and the pilot's voice, calm and reassuring, announced that they were preparing for pushback. A fleeting sense of peace, the relief of nearing the final leg of Gabe's journey, settled over Elias. It was a fragile peace, however, and it was about to be shattered. Just as the powerful tug began to nudge the aircraft away from the gate, a sharp rap echoed on the cockpit door. The captain, mid-sentence in his final pre-flight check, glanced up, annoyed by the interruption. The cockpit door opened, and a woman in a crisp airline uniform, her posture rigid and her expression unyielding, stepped inside. This was Sarah Jenkins, the gate manager for this flight, a woman notorious among ground staff for her unwavering adherence to protocol and her almost pathological aversion to any deviation from schedule. She was the embodiment of indifferent bureaucracy, focused solely on efficiency and avoiding disruptions, rather than understanding the nuanced complexities of human emotion or the gravity of Elias's mission. Her face was already set in a stern, no-nonsense mask, suggesting an impending confrontation. She exchanged a few hushed, urgent words with the captain, pointing back towards the cargo hold. The captain's brows furrowed, and he gave a reluctant nod. Sarah Jenkins emerged from the cockpit, her eyes scanning the cabin until they landed on Elias. Her heels clicked sharply on the aisle floor as she approached, a clipboard clutched in her hand like a weapon. Elias felt an instinctive prickle of unease. Her expression was devoid of warmth, her lips thin. "Staff Sergeant Thorne," she stated, her voice cold and clipped, barely loud enough to be heard over the murmurs of the cabin. "Retired," Elias corrected, his voice calm, his posture remaining perfectly still. "Yes, that's me." "I'm Sarah Jenkins, gate manager for this flight," she announced, as if presenting credentials. "I'm afraid there's been an unforeseen logistical issue." She paused, her gaze flicking dismissively towards the floor, as if avoiding eye contact with the very presence of what lay beneath. Due to an urgent freight shipment requiring immediate transport on this particular aircraft, and unforeseen cargo rebalancing issues for optimal weight distribution, the coffin of Private First Class Miller needs to be offloaded from this flight. It will be placed on a later flight, the 4:15 p.m. connection to your destination. We are prioritizing efficiency for the smooth operation of our network. She spoke with a practiced, almost rehearsed detachment, as if discussing a mislabeled package rather than human remains. The soldiers' remains will arrive eventually, but not on this specific flight. She offered a thin, insincere smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We apologize for any inconvenience." Elias felt a cold dread spread through him. An urgent freight shipment, prioritizing efficiency. The callousness of it was breathtaking. This decision violated the core, sacred protocol of a military escort. The fallen soldiers' remains were never to be separated from their escort. It was an unspoken, inviolable covenant. To do so was not merely an inconvenience. It was a profound dishonor, a betrayal of the trust placed in him, and a desecration of Gabe's final journey home. His hands clenched imperceptibly under his seat. "Ma'am," Elias said, his voice low, firm, but polite, "with all due respect, that is unacceptable. The protocol for a fallen soldier's escort dictates that the remains are never to be separated from the escort. Private First Class Miller has earned the right to an uninterrupted journey home. To offload him now would be a profound dishonor." He paused, his gaze unwavering, trying to convey the immense weight of his words. "This is not merely cargo. This is a fallen hero." Sarah Jenkins, however, was unmoved. Her expression hardened, and a flicker of impatience crossed her face. She pulled her shoulders back, asserting her authority. "Sergeant, I understand your sentiment," she said, her voice rising slightly, clearly for the benefit of any nearby passengers. "However, company policy is quite clear on logistical necessities. There are no exceptions for special cargo, regardless of its nature. We have a flight schedule to maintain and a slot to push back. We've already held this plane for 5 minutes longer than planned." She then delivered the ultimatum, her tone implying he was being difficult. "Your options are simple. You can remain on this flight, and the coffin will be transferred to the later connection, arriving a few hours after you. Or, you can deplane with the coffin and wait for the later flight yourself." She glanced pointedly at her watch. "But you need to make a decision now. You're holding up the departure of 300 passengers." A few flight attendants, who had overheard the exchange, looked visibly uncomfortable. One, a kind-faced woman who had offered Elias a complimentary coffee earlier, started to step forward, perhaps to try and intervene on Elias's behalf, but Sarah shot her a sharp, silencing glance. The implication was clear: comply, or face the consequences. This refusal to compromise, this cold, bureaucratic disregard for a fallen soldier's dignity and the escort's sacred duty, forced Elias's hand. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he could not abandon Gabe, not now, not ever. The plane's doors were sealed, the tug was straining, and time was running out. This was the point of no return. Elias was forced to choose between passive acceptance of a profound dishonor or an active public confrontation with a powerful, unfeeling corporation. His military bearing, his quiet strength, concealed a core of unyielding principle. He would not, could not, let this stand. He met Sarah Jenkins's gaze, his own eyes burning with a quiet, unwavering resolve. He chose confrontation. "Ma'am," he said, his voice now devoid of polite deference, "I will not be separated from Private First Class Miller, and neither will his remains leave this aircraft without me." He leaned back in his seat, his arms crossed, a silent, immovable object in the path of corporate expediency. The engines, which had begun to spool up, whined down to a murmur as the tug paused. The plane remained rooted to the gate, held captive by one man's unwavering honor. The conflict had begun. The tension in the cabin was a palpable, suffocating presence, thicker than the recycled air. Staff Sergeant Elias Thorne, Retier, sat unmoving in his bulkhead seat, a granite monument of quiet defiance. His gaze, calm but unyielding, was fixed on Sarah Jenkins, the gate manager, who now stood before him, her face a mask of escalating fury. The plane, moments ago vibrating with the promise of departure, was now unnervingly still, its engines whined down to an expectant murmur. The delay, initially a minor inconvenience, was rapidly morphing into something far more significant, drawing the curious, then concerned gazes of the surrounding passengers. "Sergeant Thorne," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous hiss, a desperate attempt to maintain an illusion of control. "You are delaying a federal air marshal's flight. You are interfering with interstate commerce. If you do not comply immediately, I will have you removed from this aircraft and arrested. This is your final warning." Her hand hovered over her walkie-talkie, a clear threat. Elias didn't flinch. His voice, however, remained calm, each word imbued with an unwavering conviction that seemed to resonate through the fuselage. He didn't raise it, didn't shout, but its quiet authority sliced through the strained silence. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I am not delaying this flight. You are, and you are attempting to desecrate the final journey of a fallen American soldier. Private First Class Gabriel Miller is not cargo. He is a hero, and his remains will not be separated from his escort. That coffin does not move without me, and I do not move without it." He articulated the profound disrespect and dishonor this action would represent, not just to him, but to the memory of Gabe and to every soldier who had ever served. His words weren't a plea. They were a declaration of immutable principle. Sarah Jenkins's face contorted with outrage. Her authority, her very competence, was being openly challenged by a passenger. The public nature of the defiance, the growing murmurs from the seats around them, fueled her rage. "This is preposterous," she shrieked, her voice suddenly loud, echoing through the cabin. "This man is being uncooperative and disruptive. He is causing a flight delay for over 300 passengers. This flight cannot and will not depart until he complies or is removed." She lifted her walkie-talkie to her lips. "Captain Miller, this is Sarah Jenkins. We have an uncooperative passenger delaying pushback. I need your intervention immediately." She then added, for the benefit of the now attentive passengers, "I have airport security on standby. This man will be removed." She was attempting to turn the other passengers against Elias, framing him as a selfish obstructionist. The commotion had achieved its desired effect. Everyone was now watching. Passengers began to crane their necks, whispering amongst themselves. Some were annoyed by the delay, muttering about missed connections and ruined schedules. Others, intrigued by Sarah Jenkins's dramatic pronouncements, started to piece together the fragments of the argument. Initially, a few seemed to side with the airline, assuming Elias was just another disgruntled passenger causing a scene. "Just get off the plane, buddy," a man in a business suit grumbled from a few rows back. "Some of us have places to be." Moments later, the cockpit door hissed open, and Captain Thomas Miller emerged. He was a stern-faced man in his late 50s, his expression a mixture of professional exasperation and thinly veiled impatience. His eyes, accustomed to commanding authority, swept over the scene, landing first on the irate Sarah Jenkins, then on the unmoving Elias. Sarah quickly and loudly briefed him, portraying Elias as an unreasonable, uncooperative passenger causing a significant operational headache. "Captain, this passenger is refusing to allow critical cargo adjustments. He's citing protocol for a coffin, but we have a schedule to keep." Captain Miller, under immense pressure to depart, his schedule already slipping, initially sided with Sarah. He walked towards Elias, his posture radiating no-nonsense authority. "Sergeant," he said, his voice firm, though not yet overtly hostile. "Ms. Jenkins has explained the situation. While I appreciate your, sentiment, we are operating a commercial flight. Logistical decisions are made by cargo management. I need you to either accept the transfer of the remains or deplane with them. You are delaying this flight." He wanted to resolve this quickly, cleanly, and without further incident. He was not malicious, but beholden to the rigid demands of flight schedules and corporate policy. Elias looked the captain directly in the eye, his gaze unwavering, a silent force against the captain's authority. He could feel the eyes of every passenger on him, the weight of their judgment, the burden of their impatience. But none of it mattered more than the sacred trust he carried. "Captain," Elias said, his voice resonating with an unshakable conviction that seemed to silence even the restless murmurs of the cabin, "I swore an oath. My duty, my solemn duty, is to escort Private First Class Gabriel Miller, a fallen soldier, back to his family in his hometown. I will not abandon him, not for cargo, not for a schedule, not for efficiency. If the coffin leaves this plane, so do I. And I assure you, Captain, I will ensure the reason for this delay, the reason for this dishonor, is known to every media outlet in this country, to every veteran, to every military family. By the time this plane touches down in New York, the world will know. This quiet threat, delivered with absolute conviction, with no trace of bluster or anger, unveiled Elias's true moral courage and his unwavering willingness to fight for his principles. It wasn't a physical threat. It was a devastating promise of a public relations nightmare, a moral indictment that would reverberate far beyond the confines of this single aircraft. It was a potent challenge to the airline's reputation, leveraging moral authority, not physical force. The captain, a shrewd man beneath his stern exterior, saw the flicker of absolute certainty in Elias's eyes. He saw the cold, determined resolve that hinted at a man who would follow through, no matter the personal cost. His face, already creased with stress, tightened further. He hesitated, his eyes darting between Elias's unyielding gaze and the furious face of Sarah Jenkins. The plane was still at the gate, engines spooled down, the clock ticking towards a significant and now potentially disastrous delay. The conflict was no longer just between Elias and Sarah, a minor passenger dispute. It had escalated, rapidly, into a high-stakes standoff between unwavering honor and unfeeling corporate indifference, played out on an increasingly public stage. Elias had made his stand, and the battle for Gabe's dignity had truly begun. The stagnant air in the plane's cabin crackled with an almost unbearable tension. The motionless aircraft at the gate, its engines a frustrated whisper, had become the primary arena for a burgeoning battle of wills. It was a confined space, trapping passengers as unwilling witnesses and amplifying the pressure on everyone involved. For Elias Thorne, standing firm in the aisle, flanked by the stern Captain Miller and the seething Sarah Jenkins, the situation was a crucible. He was utterly alone against the formidable hierarchy of a major airline, a furious gate manager, a pressured captain, and the looming threat of airport security. He was a single individual armed with nothing but his moral compass and an unshakable sense of duty. He had no legal standing, no institutional power beyond the sheer force of his conviction, making him exquisitely vulnerable to being forcibly removed and publicly shamed. "Sir, this is your last chance," Sarah Jenkins bellowed, her voice shaking with barely suppressed rage. "Comply, or you will be arrested for delaying federal air travel. I am calling airport security directly now, and I will issue a formal complaint that will ensure you never fly with this airline again." She jabbed a finger at her walkie-talkie, snapping a harsh command into it, her voice reverberating through the cabin via the public address system. "Attention passengers, this is Gate Manager Jenkins. We are experiencing a delay due to an uncooperative passenger who is refusing to follow airline policy. The flight cannot depart until this individual complies or is removed. We apologize for the inconvenience." Her announcement was a blatant attempt to turn the other passengers against Elias, to frame him as a selfish obstructionist, holding hundreds of people captive. The flight's departure time was now significantly overdue, bleeding precious minutes into a chaotic cascade of missed connections and spiraling logistical nightmares for the airline. Ground control was calling, their voices sharp and demanding, wanting updates on Flight 704's baffling delay. The airline's operations center was already on the phone with Captain Miller, demanding he resolve the issue immediately. The pressure on both Captain Miller and Sarah Jenkins was immense, and it manifested in increasingly aggressive tactics directed at Elias. Passengers, initially just annoyed, now grew agitated. A few started yelling at Elias to simply comply, their voices laced with impatience. "Just get off the plane already," someone shouted. "Don't you care about anyone else's schedule?" But as Sarah Jenkins continued her public condemnation, a subtle shift began to ripple through the cabin. A few passengers, having overheard snippets of Elias's earlier conversation, or simply observing his quiet dignity in the face of Sarah's vitriol, started to understand the true nature of the conflict. An elderly veteran, his uniform lapel pin glinting faintly, slowly rose from his seat. "What's he holding up the plane for?" he asked, his voice gravelly but clear. Another passenger, a young mother holding a restless child, looked from Elias to Sarah, her brows furrowed in confusion. Elias, despite the mounting threats and the rising tension, remained remarkably calm, a still point in the storm. He refused to be provoked into aggression, his strength found in his quiet dignity. When a middle-aged woman from the row behind him whispered, "What's going on, sir?" Elias slowly, deliberately, reached into his inner jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, worn, framed photograph. It was a picture of Private First Class Gabriel Miller, young and smiling, in his combat fatigues, standing proudly next to a dusty Humvee. Elias held it up for the woman, then for the captain. "This is Private First Class Gabriel Miller," he said, his voice soft but carrying. "He was 19 years old. He died serving our country in Afghanistan. I am escorting his remains home for burial. This airline wants to offload his coffin and put him on a later flight. They want to separate a fallen soldier from his escort for cargo efficiency." His words, simple and direct, humanized the situation beyond mere cargo, stripping away the bureaucratic jargon and exposing the raw, painful truth. The young mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The elderly veteran's face hardened, his jaw clenching. A collective murmur, a low growl of disbelief and dawning outrage, began to spread through the cabin. Flight attendants, witnessing this unfolding drama, visibly stiffened. Some looked increasingly uncomfortable with Sarah Jenkins's heavy-handed tactics, their eyes darting between her furious face and Elias's quiet, dignified sorrow. They were seeing a clash not of personalities, but of values. The captain, caught between the demands of corporate policy and the dawning realization of the moral disaster unfolding, felt the weight of the moment. He saw the shift in the passengers' expressions, the growing anger replacing their impatience. He knew instinctively that this was no longer a minor delay. This was a profound public relations catastrophe in the making. The clock wasn't just ticking on the flight schedule, it was ticking on the airline's reputation. Elias's core strength, his unwavering moral compass, was a force far greater than any policy manual. He was prepared to face arrest, to endure public humiliation, rather than dishonor the fallen soldier. And in that stillness, in that unwavering resolve, he had begun to turn the tide. The cabin was a pressure cooker, the air thick with the unspoken tension that had escalated from annoyance to outright alarm. Sarah Jenkins, her face contorted with frustrated fury, pointed a trembling finger at Elias Thorne. "That's him! Airport security! Escort this man off the aircraft immediately! He is delaying a federal flight!" Her voice cracked with the strain of a losing battle, but her pride wouldn't allow her to back down. Just as the words left her lips, 2 airport security officers, burly men in dark uniforms, appeared at the end of the jet bridge, moving with grim determination towards the plane. The moment had arrived. The Nin Tho, the breathless precipice where Elias's unwavering stand would either be crushed by bureaucratic might or ignite something far more powerful. But then, a voice, raspy with age but clear with conviction, cut through the escalating tension. It was the elderly veteran from earlier, the one with the faded uniform pin. He stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on the security officers. "Hold on!" he shouted, his voice gaining strength. "You stop right there. What's going on here exactly?" His words acted as a dam breaking. The murmuring in the cabin erupted into a roar of outrage and questions. "What? A soldier? Is that true?" The truth, raw and unvarnished, spread like wildfire through the rows. Passengers, initially agitated by the delay, now fully understood the callousness of the airline's demand. The true nature of the conflict, the profound disrespect being shown to a fallen hero, hit them simultaneously. The cabin erupted. The quiet impatience vanished, replaced by a collective righteous fury. Dozens of passengers, many of them veterans themselves, or military family members, or simply patriotic citizens who understood the sacredness of the moment, rose in unison. Their voices, once fragmented in individual complaints, now merged into a powerful, undeniable force. "Let the soldier fly!" a woman in the back shouted, her voice thick with emotion. The chant was immediately picked up by others, echoing through the cabin, growing in strength and volume. "Honor our heroes! Honor our heroes! Shame on the airline! Shame!" People pulled out their phones, not to record their annoyance at the delay, but to capture Sarah Jenkins's horrified, paling face. They aimed their cameras directly at her, at the security guards, at the scene of the airline's blatant disrespect. "This is going straight to Twitter," a young man yelled, already typing furiously. The whole world is going to see this. You want a delay? You're about to get a public relations disaster. Sarah Jenkins stood frozen, her face ashen, her composure shattered. Her carefully constructed authority crumbled around her. The sheer force of the public outcry, the immediate and overwhelming condemnation from hundreds of witnesses, was a blow she hadn't anticipated, couldn't counter. The security officers, caught between their orders and the furious glares of the passengers, hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, their eyes darting nervously around the cabin. In the cockpit, Captain Miller had been listening, his face grim. He heard the chants, the angry shouts, the threats of social media exposure. He saw the fury in the faces of his passengers through the cockpit door's small window. He immediately grasped the full, devastating scope of the public relations disaster unfolding on his aircraft. A disaster that would not only cost Sarah Jenkins her job, but could cripple the airline's reputation. His years of experience, his unwavering dedication to his career, kicked in. He made a snap decision, overriding Sarah Jenkins's waning authority. He stepped fully into the cabin, his voice cutting through the uproar like a knife. "That's enough, Ms. Jenkins," he barked, his voice firm and resonating with rediscovered authority. "The coffin stays. Sergeant Thorne, thank you for your service. We will proceed as planned." He turned to the bewildered security guards. "There's no issue here. Stand down. This flight is pushing back." Sarah Jenkins tried to protest, a strangled sound escaping her throat. "But Captain, the freight, the schedule." "My decision is final, Ms. Jenkins," Captain Miller stated, his eyes blazing. "You are relieved of your duties for this flight. Please deplane." He then turned to the now applauding passengers, his face still stern but a faint line of relief around his mouth. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We will now proceed to push back, and we will do so with Private First Class Miller on board, escorted by Staff Sergeant Thorne. Thank you for your patience and your understanding." The cabin erupted in thunderous applause, a wave of cheers, and even a few shouts of "God bless America." The sheer relief was palpable, a tangible force washing over the aircraft. Sarah Jenkins, utterly humiliated and outmaneuvered, stood speechless, her face crimson with mortification, her authority completely shattered. She knew in that gut-wrenching moment that her career, and likely her reputation in the airline industry, was effectively over. Her downfall was swift and commensurate with her villainy, a public and immediate consequence of her callousness and disregard for honor. She was led away by one of the security officers, her head bowed, defeated. Elias, still stoic amidst the roaring applause, offered a quiet, respectful nod to Captain Miller, then turned to the unified passengers. His eyes, usually guarded, held a flicker of profound gratitude. Many passengers, tears in their eyes, reached out to shake his hand, some tearfully thanking him for his stand, for honoring the fallen. Flight attendants, now visibly relieved and emotional, approached him, offering him water, blankets, and genuine heartfelt apologies for their supervisor's behavior. The ultimate vindication for Elias was not just the coffin remaining on the plane, but the overwhelming public support, the palpable sense of shared honor that filled the cabin, and the powerful reassertion of human decency over cold corporate indifference. The tug re-engaged, and with a gentle shudder, Flight 714 finally began to push back from the gate, slowly at first, then gaining momentum. As the aircraft turned onto the taxiway, Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom again, softer this time, but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are now cleared for takeoff, and I want to acknowledge once again the presence of Staff Sergeant Elias Thorne, escorting Private First Class Gabriel Miller, a true American hero, on his final journey home. We are honored to have them both on board. Thank you." His words were met with another, softer but equally heartfelt wave of applause. Elias, gazing out the window at the receding terminal, knew he had done his duty. Gabe was finally going home, with honor. The landing in the small, regional airport of Dalton, Georgia, was quiet, respectful, and entirely devoid of the usual commercial rush. Word had spread. As Flight 714 taxied to the gate, a solemn assembly awaited on the tarmac, a military honor guard in crisp dress uniforms, a phalanx of local law enforcement vehicles, and, most poignantly, a small grieving family huddled together, their faces etched with a sorrow too profound for words. The air, typically filled with the distant roar of jets and the chatter of passengers, was thick with a reverent silence. Elias felt a profound sense of completion, a quiet victory in the face of immense loss. His mission, a sacred trust, was finally fulfilled. As the plane came to a complete stop, Captain Miller's voice, now soft and filled with a rare raw emotion, came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Dalton. We ask for your patience as we observe a moment of silence for Private First Class Gabriel Miller, and allow his family and our honor guard to receive him with the dignity he so bravely earned." The cabin remained hushed, an unspoken wave of respect passing through the passengers. When the main cabin door finally opened, it wasn't the usual hurried jostle for overhead bags. Instead, every passenger remained seated, many with tears in their eyes, as Elias Thorne, head held high, walked slowly down the aisle. He paused at the door, offering a final, lingering look at the flag-draped coffin being carefully maneuvered from the cargo hold. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped onto the jet bridge, into the waiting arms of the honor guard. On the tarmac, as the coffin was reverently transferred, Elias approached Gabe's family. He found them standing together, huddled against the chill of the afternoon, their faces pale. Gabe's mother, a fragile woman with tear-reddened eyes, looked at Elias, a flicker of bewildered gratitude in her gaze. Elias simply extended a hand, offering a quiet, comforting word that was for her ears alone, perhaps sharing a brief, cherished memory of Gabe, a moment of warmth amidst the cold formality of military honors. He stayed, a silent pillar of support, as the honor guard performed their solemn duty, the crisp folds of the flag, the precision of their movements, a poignant tribute to a life cut short. He fulfilled his sacred duty, delivering Gabe home with the dignity he deserved, ensuring his final journey was one of respect and profound honor. The incident on Flight 714 exploded onto the global stage, largely fueled by the viral videos shared by passengers. The narrative was undeniable. A callous airline attempting to desecrate a fallen soldier's escort for the sake of efficiency, thwarted by the unwavering courage of a single veteran and the collective outrage of hundreds of ordinary citizens. The backlash against the airline was immediate and ferocious, a firestorm of condemnation from every corner of the internet and mainstream media. Sarah Jenkins's career was over. Within hours of the flight's landing, social media was ablaze with her name, her furious face captured in countless videos. The airline, facing an unprecedented public relations crisis, acted swiftly and decisively. They not only issued a swift, unequivocal public apology, humble and contrite, but also announced her immediate termination. The statement, released within 24 hours, explicitly condemned her actions as unacceptable and in direct violation of our company values. This was her public shaming and professional ruin, a swift and brutal consequence for her heartless disregard for dignity and honor. However, the airline, under immense pressure, shrewdly transformed the crisis into an opportunity for genuine change. Beyond Sarah Jenkins's termination and the public apology, they announced sweeping new training programs for all staff, from gate agents to flight attendants, focusing on military escort protocols, cultural sensitivity, and, most importantly, empathy. They committed to new initiatives supporting veterans and military families, making significant public donations to relevant charities, and establishing a dedicated liaison office for military travel. This became their new beginning, a chance to redeem their tarnished image and genuinely integrate a moral compass into their corporate operations, proving that even a major corporation could learn from its mistakes and pivot towards a more humane approach. Elias Thorne, initially wanting nothing more than to return to his quiet retirement, found himself unwittingly hailed as a national hero. His phone rang incessantly with requests for interviews, invitations to speak at military ceremonies, veterans events, and even corporate conferences, where he calmly but firmly spoke about the enduring power of honor, the true meaning of sacrifice, and the crucial importance of corporate responsibility. He found himself on morning talk shows, his quiet dignity a stark contrast to the often sensationalist environment. He used his newfound platform with purpose, declining lucrative offers for personal endorsements, preferring instead to lend his name and story exclusively to charitable causes dedicated to fallen soldiers' families and improving military travel protocols. He became a symbol of quiet dignity, unwavering principle, and the profound impact one individual could have against systemic indifference. A few weeks after Gabe's burial, Elias made a solitary journey back to the quiet cemetery in Dalton. He found Gabe's simple headstone, adorned with fresh flowers and a small, weathered American flag. He stood there for a long time, the only sound the rustle of autumn leaves. Just as he turned to leave, Captain Miller, having flown to the small town specifically to see him, appeared. He looked different, a quiet humility replacing his earlier sternness. "Sergeant Thorne," Captain Miller said, his voice soft, "I came to thank you again, properly, and to apologize for my initial hesitation. What you did, it changed me. It made me a better captain, a more empathetic leader. I saw the true cost of our corporate indifference that day, and I won't forget it." He paused, looking at Gabe's grave. "The airline is making real changes, Sergeant. Because of you. They've established a new Thorne protocol for all military escorts. Your name is now synonymous with honor in our training manuals." Elias offered a faint, acknowledging smile. "Captain, sometimes it takes a storm to show us what truly matters. Gabe's journey wasn't just about getting home. It was about reminding us all what honor truly means, and what we owe to those who serve." Their conversation solidified their changed perspectives and the lasting impact of Elias's courageous stand. The quiet veteran had, through one extraordinary act, reignited a spark of humanity in the heart of a corporate giant, ensuring that the next fallen hero's journey home would be met with the unwavering respect they deserved. 1 year later, the quiet dignity that defined Elias Thorne had not faded, but had deepened, like the patina on an old, cherished medal. He hadn't become a celebrity in the traditional sense, avoiding the flashing lights and incessant demands for public appearances. Instead, he had carved out a new, profoundly impactful life, becoming a respected, quiet advocate for those who served. His modest military pension and the small, carefully managed sum from the airline's eventual massive donation to military charities allowed him to dedicate his time entirely to this renewed purpose, free from the constraints of personal gain. He served on the board of a national veterans support organization, his voice calm and authoritative in meetings, advocating for better mental health services, smoother transitions to civilian life, and unwavering support for military families. He volunteered tirelessly with local charities, often found at community centers, sharing coffee and quiet wisdom with young soldiers grappling with the invisible wounds of war, or mentoring teenagers considering enlistment, sharing the hard-won lessons of duty and sacrifice. He had found a new purpose, deeply rooted in his old one, a testament to the enduring power of service beyond the uniform. Elias was instrumental in improving the very system that had so profoundly failed him. The Thorne Protocol, as it was now formally known within the airline industry, had become a mandatory part of flight crew training across numerous major carriers. It wasn't just a policy. It was a comprehensive educational module that included video testimonials from veterans, detailed explanations of military escort traditions, and critically, role-playing scenarios designed to cultivate empathy and understanding in airline staff. Elias himself, despite his aversion to the spotlight, often attended these ground staff training sessions, not as an accuser, but as a calm, compelling teacher. He would stand before rooms of uniformed employees, from baggage handlers to customer service representatives, sharing the profound significance of each flag-draped casket, each silent journey, and each grieving family. He humanized the cargo, transforming a logistical procedure into a sacred trust. He had also established a small fund in Private First Class Gabriel Miller's name, financed initially by his own contributions and later by the airline's long-term commitment. This fund was dedicated to ensuring dignified returns for all fallen heroes, covering any unforeseen costs or logistical challenges that might arise, ensuring no other soldier's journey home would ever again face bureaucratic indifference. One crisp autumn morning, Elias found himself at a small, solemn ceremony at a local memorial park. A new, polished granite bench had been dedicated to the community's fallen heroes, including Gabe Miller. Elias stood slightly apart from the small crowd, his posture still strong, his eyes still carrying that deep reverence for the cost of freedom. He wasn't in uniform, but his presence exuded quiet leadership, an undeniable aura of authority that came from experience and unwavering principle. As the ceremony concluded, he walked towards Gabe's humble headstone, a familiar ritual. He gently adjusted the small American flag planted beside it, ensuring its folds hung perfectly, a small, solitary act of profound respect. The morning sun cast long shadows, painting the scene in hues of gold and amber. Later that day, Elias was at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson once more, this time as a mere passenger, heading to a veterans conference. As he walked through the bustling terminal, his carry-on slung over his shoulder, he approached his gate. A gate agent, a young woman in her early 20s, looked up from her computer. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition. It was a fleeting moment, barely a second. Then, instinctively, her hand went to her brow. She didn't salute, not precisely, but it was a clear, respectful acknowledgement, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. Elias nodded back, a faint, knowing smile gracing his lips. He was no longer just a retired staff sergeant. He was a living embodiment of the enduring power of honor, a quiet hero who had reminded a world grown indifferent that some principles were worth fighting for, transforming a moment of indignity into a lasting legacy of respect and change, ensuring that the journey home, for every hero, would always be one of unblemished honor. If this story stirred your heart and reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining the journey.